Welcome to our second set of 4 BCO Sundays at 3 videos. You've enjoyed Jonathan Palevsky's entertaining informances at Kraushauer Auditorium. Well, these 4 videos are mini informances, each one featuring a BCO performance of a different Beethoven symphony movement. We begin with the first movement of the monumental Symphony No.3, Eroica. The symphony is monumental in its length and its breadth. It dramatically increases the more constrained efforts of Haydn and Mozart. And in fact, it sets the way for a further expansion in Beethoven's own Ninth Symphony and ultimately to the epic symphonic works of Mahler and Bruckner. Now, my own experience with this work goes way back to when I was about 5 years old and taking Saturday afternoon music classes at the Mannes College of Music. And during the breaks, I would go to the library and I knew where this one record was. I would pull it down. I would play it every Saturday. And it was, in fact, the Eroica Symphony. Very close to my heart. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Jonathan Palevsky, who is going to provide some historical perspective on this remarkable piece of music. Jonathan?
Thank you, Markand, for that lovely introduction. It's always a pleasure to talk about the Eroica, and it's one of my favorite symphonies. It's a symphony I love lecturing about. It is a work that is a watershed in music, and by that we mean there is music before the Eroica and there's music after the Eroica, and you cannot confuse the two. They are radically different. Maybe the Eroica's changes and influence wasn't immediately felt, but certainly by the time you get into the 19th century, there is no avoiding the incredible effect that this piece had upon every composer of symphonies and other music subsequent to Beethoven. Let's talk about Beethoven 1802, the year this piece is conceived. It's really written 1802 and 1803. It's performed first privately in 1804 and then in 1805. Beethoven in 1802 is in a tough place. On hand A, this is a man who is blessed with an incredibly successful career in Vienna. This is a man who has more commissions than he knows what to do with, more students than he can handle. And not only does he have many students, he has, more importantly, the right students. He has the children of the nobility to choose from. What an incredible thing that is. He is teaching the most attractive, the most interesting people in Vienna, and they adore him. His patrons, Prince Lichnowsky, Prince Lobkowitz, Razumovsky, all of these people are his amazing patrons who adore him. And it doesn't matter how rude he is to them, they still love him. He has more publishers than he knows what to do with. And in fact, he can even sell the same work to more than one publisher. Slightly unethical, but it was done. This is before copyright. Anything goes and anything went at that time, the wild, wild west of music in Central Europe. So Beethoven comes to Vienna in 1792. 10 years later, in 1802, he is doing remarkably well. But there's one catch, and it's a big one, that beginning in 1796, Beethoven starts noticing symptoms of his own deafness. Beginning in 1796, he starts writing about this. In fact, our knowledge of Beethoven's deafness is really dependent on Beethoven himself and the letters he writes to people about his symptoms, because basically we have no physical bones, we have no way of really diagnosing his hearing other than his own testimony. And so in 1796, Beethoven starts to notice that he's deaf. By 1801, he's writing letters to friends about his infirmity. Not only was Beethoven's hearing bothersome, but also Beethoven's colon bothered him a great deal. He had a terrible stomach, a terrible digestive system, and they seem to have bothered him at the same time together. It was an incredible infirmity. And so his doctor, Dr. Schmidt, said to him, Herr Beethoven, maybe you should leave the city for a few months, and maybe you should go to the country. It'll be easier on your hearing because the loud noises of the city bothered him. It'll be easier on your peace of mind. Maybe you'll just sketch. He knew Beethoven loved nature, and Beethoven adored nature so much. It was one of his favorite things to go for long walks in the country. Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, the next work we'll be discussing after this one, an incredible hymn, beautiful tribute to nature. And Beethoven loved being in the country and loved nature. And so in April of 1802, off he goes to the little town of Heiligenstadt. Today, it's a suburb of Vienna, but in Beethoven's time, it is a pretty rural village. And you will see images of Beethoven's apartment where he lived in Heiligenstadt, and you'll also see the surrounding beautiful areas. I don't know if it's the Vienna woods or not, but it's certainly woodsy. Now, Beethoven spends this time in Heiligenstadt, and he comes to a conclusion. And his conclusion is written in what we call the Heiligenstadt Testament. It's a letter that he wrote addressed to his brothers, Karl and blank Beethoven. Now, surely Beethoven knew the name of his other brother, which was Nicholas Johann, but Beethoven avoided using his brother's name as much as possible. This is very interesting because Beethoven's father's name was Johann, and Beethoven had a terrible relations with his father. His father was a drunk. His father was an unpleasant, unruly, and nasty person, and Beethoven never said the name of his brother if he could avoid it, and called him all sorts of names. So the Heiligenstadt Testament, this fascinating document, which is only found after Beethoven's death, it's never sent, is addressed to his brothers, Karl and blank Beethoven. And what's in it? It's about 2 pages long. It's written on 3 successive days, or 4, between October 6th and the 10th. What's in it? What's in the Heiligenstadt Testament? Well, it's part Last Will and Testament. It's part therapy journal. It's part confession, part suicide note. That's a lot of things. Well, Beethoven resolves that he has not said everything he has to say, and he leaves Heiligenstadt and emerges into the real world in April of 1802, determined that he has something to say, and he is not leaving this world until he has said it. He tells his friend Karl Czerny, I am not satisfied with what I have written up until now. I am going to take a new path, a new way. And what is the new way? And what are some of the examples of it? Well, the new way is all about self-expression. The new way is all about pieces that plumb the depths of sorrow, plumb the depths of exaltation, and everything in between. The new way is that the Symphony No.3 will be different from the Symphony No.4, which will be different from the Symphony No.5. Each piece will be different from the next piece and the piece previous to it in his composition. You ask, why did Haydn write 104 symphonies and Beethoven only 9? Is it because Beethoven was lazy or stupid? No, it's because the level of originality that Beethoven wants to pump into his music is now unprecedented. Let's look at this. Symphony No.3, huge, expansive, revolutionary. Symphony No.3, smaller and conservative. Symphony No.5, totally radical, but distilled and not expansive at all. The great battle between C minor and C major. And Symphony No.6, an incredibly expansive hymn to nature. 4 symphonies, 4 completely different approaches to music. Wow, totally different. What else? Expression, this idea that each piece will be different from the other piece and a unique piece unto itself. Rhythm emerges as incredibly important, and sometimes rhythm devoid of melody whatsoever. The symphony will be, this isn't so much in the Eroica, but in many of Beethoven's symphonies, the symphony is now going to be a mini world, and maybe Beethoven won't have 4 separate ideas in 4 different forms. Maybe Beethoven is going to embark upon this concept that the symphony will embrace a concept, an idea. This eventually becomes completely realized in the Symphony No.9. What happens in the actual piece? You know, all of this would be meaningless if Beethoven didn't write this music in the Eroica. And also, before we even get to that, what about the other pieces? The Eroica is the first of this middle or heroic period that emerges from Heiligenstadt. What, mes petits amis, are the other pieces? Well, in addition to those 4 symphonies, 3, 4, 5, and 6, how about the Razumovsky string quartets? How about 2 versions of the opera Fidelio? How about the Oratorio Christ on the Mount of Olives? How about numerous piano sonatas? How about the Archduke Trio, the Ghost Trio? There is not a field Beethoven doesn't write revolutionary music in. And so he is on fire. And this piece is the first log as it were, if I may push that metaphor even further. Okay, the first movement of Beethoven's First Symphony, Second Symphony, they're about 10 minutes. This is 16 minutes long, and that's without repeating the exposition. So it's almost double the length of previous movements. It is an incredibly expansive sonata form. For example, right from the get-go, it begins with a pair of chords. This pair of chords, and they are both in E flat. Symphony's in E flat. The chords are in E flat. Let's go. We are not having this long, slow, expansive introduction that we have in Symphonies 1 and 2. Mes petits amis. We are going to have two chords and we are off and running. And then we meet the hero. And the hero played in the cello is this fantastic theme. Oh, unbelievable. Just absolutely spectacular. The hero is going to be this big, expansive theme in E flat. Normally, a sonata form has a first theme, a second theme, a transition. This has four themes of significance. It has fugues in it. It has these chords in it, which are unheard of. It doesn't just begin with chords, but stentorian, enormous chords play a huge role in this entire symphony. Wow. So this is a revolutionary piece. The coda is another development section, as if the incredible development section that we have is not enough. There is nothing Beethoven threw in here except the kitchen sink, and I think if you look closely, you'll find that too. So a revolutionary piece, a piece like no other ever written before it. First performance was at Prince Lobkowitz's house, private place. It's his palace in Vienna. You can go visit. It's now a museum of theater puppets. I'm not a fan. Maybe you like puppets. Not so much. I don't know. They freak me out. But the room is tiny, especially if you're jam an orchestra and a few appreciative princes in there. It's also incredibly reverberant. It must have been a loud and intense experience to hear the Eroica in such a small place. The first performance of the Theater an der Wien in 1805, one critic said, "I'd give a kreutzer just to make the thing stop." Just imagine the theater probably cold. This thing takes about 50 minutes to be performed. Musicians who probably didn't play it that well because it was unfamiliar and radical. Yeah, but 2 years later, critics are starting to understand the significance and importance of this thing. Musicians are happy to play it for free. And very, very soon, the Eroica becomes an incredibly important and significant piece of music. There's some images coming with the music, which I'd just love to tell you about. A couple of Heiligenstadt, the exact apartment, the Wohnung where Beethoven lived. There's also a couple of pictures of Napoleon. Why Napoleon? And there's also pictures of the title page of this incredible piece. Well, first off, Beethoven was planning to visit Paris, which he never did. But he was planning to visit Paris. And in Paris, he was very, very excited about perhaps working for Napoleon. And Beethoven loved Napoleon as first consul because Napoleon was a liberator at that point. Napoleon was a person who was upsetting the stodgy aristocracy, and Beethoven wanted to blow them all up. He also loved their money. And so Beethoven was a huge fan of Napoleon, and you'll see a picture of Napoleon as first consul. Then, after that, you will see Beethoven as emperor, painted by David, the great propagandist of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era. And David paints Napoleon, I should say, as this incredibly heroic person who's crossing the Alps into Italy, and will have incredibly amazing battles there like Marengo. And on the bottom of the painting, you'll see a little thing that says Hannibal and one that says Charlemagne. And of course, Bonaparte is equated with those incredible generals and military people. And Beethoven was furious. He was just so angry. He went to the title page of this extraordinary piece and he ripped it up and he said, "You are just like all the others. Are you two no better?" And the man who was witness to this, who tells the story, his name is Ferdinand Ries, and you'll see that he's also pictured in this. And now, mes petits amis, without further ado, it is my extreme pleasure to invite you to listen to the Baltimore Chamber Orchestra and Markand Thakar as they perform Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, the first movement, one of the great musical experiences that one can ever be privileged to have. Thank you.
mes amis, petits ou grands. I hope you enjoyed this BCO Sundays at 3 video. Join us in 2 weeks for another Jonathan Palevsky Informance featuring a Baltimore Chamber Orchestra performance of a movement of a Beethoven symphony, this time the second movement, Seen by the Brook, of the remarkable hybrid Pastoral Symphony, part pastoral in the form of a symphony, and part symphony with the characteristics of a pastoral, which is a musical depiction of nature. As the music director and conductor, it was my honor to share the stage for this performance with the sensational musicians of the BCO, and it is likewise my great pleasure to share the performance with you.